All right, tight paintings, loose paintings, which are better? I don't think either are better. Obviously, art, it's all about taste. But you know, I thought this is a worthwhile discussion to have, and I like getting your guys' feedback and your thoughts in the comment section. So let's start the conversation here. Let me just give you a little brief explanation of my journey with this. When I first started painting, I was definitely a tight painter. I think oftentimes beginning painters do tend to be tight painters, meaning focusing on detail. They're going to paint all the details. I think a lot of painters, as they mature and start seeing as a painter, then their painting gets looser and more suggestive. All right, so how do people see as a painter? I would say that, you know, one of the things you learn is to squint at a subject so that you eliminate detail and you just see the overall, you know, pattern of shapes. And then you know, you're looking for an interesting pattern of shapes, whether that be light and dark or different colors or whatever. And that is your composition. And again, I've said many times, I think composition is the most important thing. Now, once you've broken down everything into interesting shapes, then you go into those specific shapes with some refinement. Now, how far you take that refinement is up to you. You may like start refining those, like say in other words, you have one of the shapes is a group of buildings. Now a loose painter will go into that shape of buildings and maybe suggest a rooftop here or this or that, very subtle suggestions. Whereas a more detailed painter will go in and paint every window and door and doorknob and whatever, all that stuff. The one thing that I would say that I've noticed is that, you know, it's fine to go into that if you like painting detail, but the thing that I found is that you've got to be very careful not to break up the overall design with detail. That's the main thing. Now, it's a personal taste thing. I've seen paintings that are done that really work well, that are super detailed, but for the most part, I just don't like, as I've progressed as a painter, I tend to like paintings that are done with a visual shorthand where a painter can just sort of suggest things and then it allows you to participate. You fill in the blanks. So that's kind of the painting that I appreciate. That doesn't mean, you know, most people, this is sort of an interesting thing I've found. A lot of people that first start looking at art, when they first start looking at it or they first start painting, they're blown away by detail. You know, they'll say, oh my God, that's amazing. It looks just like a photograph. And I think there are a lot of painters that wish they could paint like a camera. They could just, or a digital printer. I've heard painters say that. They wish they could just reproduce exactly what they see. And that's fine. Just for me, I feel like the challenge is in developing a personal visual shorthand that allows me to communicate in the simplest way. I heard somebody once say, like, you know, like an artist or like an author like Tolstoy, and forgive me if I've said this before, but like Tolstoy could go in, he could describe the vibe and the feeling of say a room in 3 sentences, where it would take you or I or somebody else who wasn't a writer, it would take them, you know, 10 pages and they still wouldn't capture the feeling that was captured in those 3 lines that Tolstoy wrote. So I think that's the thing you're going for, or at least I am as a painter. I'm trying to state, you know, capture a feeling or capture an effect in the simplest terms, if that makes sense, like the simplest way. There's another saying, which is the eye that is not told what to see sees more. In other words, if you suggest something, it allows participation with the viewer, and the viewer is able to, like, their mind fills in the blanks. Most of the time, that's how we see. We walk around seeing impressionistically. We just see shapes. It's not until you take the time to look at something specifically and focus on it that you start noticing detail. And that's where the problem comes in painting. We are focusing on a subject, so we just naturally, you know, when you're first starting, you're going to focus on detail and think you need to paint all that detail. But as you progress as an artist and you begin to see like a painter, you realize you don't need to get bogged down in detail, and a lot of times that detail can detract from the overall design and the overall message. So again, neither is better. It just depends on what you're trying to convey. You know, and so it's very personal. So I don't think either one is better. There are certain painters or certain artists and also collectors or art appreciators who really like super detailed work, or there's some that like super loose and abstracted work. Myself, I like both. For me, the main thing I'm looking for is composition. I don't care how far the painter takes it as far as detail is concerned. I just am looking for a composition and a mood and a feeling, and that's the most important thing. Now, if a painting has that, and then there is a certain level of, and it's taken to a fine level of detail, I can really appreciate that. On the other hand, if there is an interesting composition and yet the fine detail detracts from the overall mood, then it doesn't work for me. But again, so painting, you know, it can work it can be detailed, it can be loose, it doesn't matter. If the painting works, it works. And again, that's totally personal. So, but let me show you a couple of examples of my work, you know, and maybe that'll help explain what I'm talking about. Okay, so this first painting is of some Canada geese, obviously, and this is a 10 by 10 inch painting. And again, some people would think this is tightly painted, but you know, for me, it's sort of loose. It's kind of focusing on the abstract, just basically focusing on shapes and composition. And it was probably mostly painted with like a number 8 flat or bright. And so there's, you know, you can see brushworks. The brushwork is, you know, there's some thick, direct brushwork here. But you know, sort of loose, but still kind of tight actually, like in here, you know, especially for the scale. I mean, at 10 by 10, these, you know, use some small brushes in there to get some of the details on the heads of the geese. But that's really it. Just in here, all of this is all broadly suggested, not a lot of detail. Again, it's mostly focused on the abstract design, and that's really it. Okay, so here's another painting of Canada geese, and on this one I just felt like it needed a little bit more refinement. So there's definitely more detail in this. You can see in the feathers here, although it's still loosely painted if you look closely, there's definitely more detail in the like in the feathers and obviously in the water. And I was kind of attracted to the ripples in the water, like the little ripples here and whatnot. So this subject just required a little more refinement to capture what it was that attracted me to the scene. If this painting were painted larger, again, this is another 10 by 10. If this were painted, say 36 by 36, then all of these brush strokes could be a lot more aggressive and, you know, and bigger. But, you know, putting such a complicated scene onto a smaller panel, it required, you know, small brushes to kind of capture you know, capture the scene the way I wanted to. All right, so if we zoom in, then all of a sudden, then it looks pretty loose. So a lot of times, you know, whether something is loose or tight is just a matter of scale. Okay, so that's one reason that it's really important to see work in real life, because you know, obviously when we're seeing most of the paintings we see are online, they're either on our phone or on a computer, and you just have no idea of the scale. So again, something that's like 36 by 36 that's painted with a lot of bravado, when it's shrunken down to, you know, like 2 inches wide on your phone screen, you're like, wow, that's super tight. And then if you go to a museum and you see it in person, it's like, oh my God, look at all those big brushworks, and it's messy and this and that. So you've got to see work in real life. I think that helps you grow as a painter. It really does. So yeah, definitely see the work in person whenever you can. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the subject. Again, I love hearing what you guys think, so let me know in the comments. It's beautiful outside today, so I'm gonna go paint. Remember, that's the most important thing. It's fun to talk about painting, but the most important thing is to get out there and do it, or go to your studio and do it, or whatever works for you, but to get to work. That's the most important thing. Intellectualizing only goes so far, but it's good to do once in a while. So anyway, as usual, thanks for hanging out, guys. I will see you in the next video.